of their contracted future. She was conscious now of the improvement of not having to take her present and her future at once. They were about as much as she could manage when taken separate. She had, none the less, to give her mind steadily to what Mr. Mudge had again written her about, the idea of her applying for a transfer to an office quite similar, she couldn't yet hope for a place in a bigger, under the very roof where he was foreman, so that dangled before her every minute of the day he should see her, as he called it, hourly, and in a part, the far northwest district, where with her mother she would save on their 2 rooms alone nearly 3 shillings. It would be far from dazzling to exchange Mayfair for Chalk Farm, and it wore upon her much that he could never drop a subject. Still it didn't wear as things had worn, the worries of the early times of their great misery, her own, her mother's, and her elder sister's, the last of whom had succumbed to all but absolute want when, as conscious and incredulous ladies, suddenly bereft, betrayed, overwhelmed, they had slipped faster and faster down the steep slope at the bottom of which she alone had rebounded. Her mother had never rebounded any more at the bottom than on the way, had only rumbled and grumbled down and down, making, in respect of caps, topics and habits, no effort whatever, which simply meant smelling much of the time of whiskey. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2 of In the Cage by Henry James. It was always rather quiet at Cocker's while the contingent from Ladles and Thrupp's and all the other great places were at luncheon, or, as the young men used vulgarly to say, while the animals were feeding. She had 40 minutes in advance of this to go home for her own dinner, and when she came back and one of the young men took his turn there was often half an hour during which she could pull out a bit of work or a book from the place where she borrowed novels, very greasy, in fine print, and all about fine folks, at a halfpenny a day. This sacred pause was one of the numerous ways in which the establishment kept its finger on the pulse of fashion and fell into the rhythm of the larger life. It had something to do, one day, with the particular flare of importance of an arriving customer, a lady whose meals were apparently irregular, yet whom she was destined, she afterwards found, not to forget. The girl was blasée; nothing could belong more, as she perfectly knew, to the intense publicity of her profession, but she had a whimsical mind and wonderful nerves. She was subject, in short, to sudden flickers of antipathy and sympathy, red gleams in the grey fitful needs to notice and to care, odd caprices of curiosity. She had a friend who had invented a new career for women, that of being in and out of people's houses to look after the flowers. Mrs. Jordan had a manner of her own of sounding this allusion. The flowers, on her lips, were, in fantastic places, in happy homes, as usual as the coals or the daily papers. She took charge of them, at any rate, in all the rooms, at so much a month, and people were quickly finding out what it was to make over this strange burden of the pampered to the widow of a clergyman. The widow, on her side, dilating on the initiations thus opened up to her, had been splendid to her young friend, over the way she was made free of the greatest houses, the way especially when she did the dinner-tables, set out so often for 20, she felt that a single step more would transform her whole social position. On its being asked of her then if she circulated only in a sort of tropical solitude, with the upper servants for picturesque natives, and on her having to assent to this glance at her limitations, she had found a reply to the girl's invidious question. "You've no imagination, my dear." That was because a door more than half open to the higher life couldn't be called anything but a thin partition. Mrs. Jordan's imagination quite did away with the thickness. Our young lady had not taken up the charge, had dealt with it good-humouredly, just because she knew so well what to think of it. It was at once one of her most cherished complaints and most secret supports that people didn't